we are talking about Springboard resources, which when I come up with names for things, it sort of, I don't know if it helps or not, but that's how it exists in my head. So today we're talking about resources to help families. Oh, hi, Jenny from Glasgow. It's good to see you. Well, it's good to read you and see your cute little picture. We are going to talk about Springboard resources because I find this is something that I use more than I think I use, because in working with parents, we find that they can sometimes struggle, not because they have no skills, but sometimes because they are struggling to figure out how to start using them. It's sort of like being in a car, I guess, a broken down car. Sometimes we, when trying to resource parents, do all of the work. Oh, hi, it's Sarah and Eliana. Welcome. Sometimes we try to do all the work for parents when we're trying to resource them. And so we give them a resource that gives them everything that they need to do whatever we want them to do. So we give them sort of, not the devotional, but we say, first ask this question and then do this question. And then if you could do then this activity, and then we'll do something else. And then this will take you through this fantastic experience with your child. Here, have a resource that completely does all of your work for you. And we think that helps parents because it takes the pressure off of their shoulders. And what I find is it does take the pressure off their shoulders in some ways, but the pressure it takes off is the pressure that enables them to learn how to own those skills for themselves. And so rather than give parents a resource that says, here's everything you could possibly need to do exactly what I want you to do, thus taking out their sort of brain power, their growth, a Springboard resource is saying to parents, you have these skills, you know how to do this. I just get it's hard to jump into it. And I feel like it's like by giving them a resource that gives them everything they could possibly need, we make them a passenger in the car. Here, join the Parenting for Faith car. I'm going to put you in. I'm going to give you everything you need, and you just go along for the ride. And that's great. And it's a nice ride, but it doesn't teach them how to drive a car. It doesn't get them going on their own journey. Where a Springboard resource is sort of saying, look, we have a car that needs a jump start, and so we need to push. And sometimes parents are like, I have the skill. I know now how to help my kids pray. But like, how do you jump into that casually? I don't quite know how to get in there. Once I'm in there, I can figure it out, but how do I get going? And so they need help getting that car going. If you've ever had a car that's broken down and you try to push it, one person trying to push a car just seems almost impossible. So you gather like 4 people and you get it that first push, and it takes everyone making grunting noises. And then as soon as it's going, everyone's like, oh, and you're sort of jogging along. One person jumps in the car and then they can go. But it takes that initial push. And I find parents need help with the initial push. So Springboard resource is getting parents past the initial push with skills that they already have, whether or not they know they can apply it to Parenting for Faith. They have those skills, and we're just sort of facilitating them using them. I'm going to get my notes. Hold on. Whoosh. Sorry, everybody. Right, yes. It's for getting over the hump. For example, sometimes it's just an awkward thing. So I don't know if you know, but I'm American from a long time ago, and I moved to this country 17 years ago. And I was noticing that part of me goes, got to teach kid American history. But it's and I have the skills. I know how to teach American history. How do you drop that into casual conversation? Oh, by the way, did I teach you about the Battle of Bunker Hill? Just, sort of saying. And I found, how do I jump into it? Quite difficult until we had a 4th of July party and we were naturally playing with other American adults a states and capitals game, and we were all playing and talking about America and remembering the childhood of learning, and my kids sort of wandered along and I'm like, have I ever told you about the states? And I all of a sudden was into teaching my kid about American history without knowing it, because there was a situation that's springboarded me into it. And we're just talking about doing that, creating that that facilitation of getting parents into it so they can go, oh, this is easy. I can do this. I know how to do this. I'm good at this, and helping them there. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about it. I'm going to talk you through how to create one, and then we're going to look at some of the scenarios that you guys are in. We're going to pick one, and we're going to work it through and sort of create at least the outline of a Springboard resource together, and then we'll do some questions and answers. So that's what we're looking at doing. My Wi-Fi, for some reason, isn't working, so I am on my personal data. So if at some point I just go dark, then I'm going to switch to a different phone, and I won't be able to use my mic, but we'll see it through. So just stick with me here. So a Springboard resource is not all singing, all dancing. This isn't making them a passenger. This is a Springboard. And so there are ways of, and the other thing this isn't, is introducing them to skills. I find this sometimes can be confusing because we're like, well, I'll just create a Springboard resource to teach them stuff. And I find that it could work. I'm not saying it won't work. I'm saying it feels a bit like dropping them in the deep end, because a Springboard resource doesn't handhold you through the whole process. So it jumps off assuming that once you're in the air, you're going to fly, like a mama bird pushing a baby bird out of a nest. Like, they don't push them out of the nest until they know they can fly. If you push them out of the nest beforehand, that's just a tough learning process. And so it's a Springboard resource is pushing the baby bird parents out of the nest, going, you can do this, I believe in you. So it's not the all singing, all dancing. So creating a Springboard resource is quite not tricky, quite wisdom requiring, because you need to know what is the launch point. What am I trying to get them to do, and what can they handle by themselves? So let's have a look. And then this is when I'm going to seamlessly do something that is going to make you go, ooh, you ready? You ready for this? Oh, and then I just turn it around and you're looking at my whiteboard. I know, it's so exciting. Here, I'm going to try to get us a bit closer. This is my whiteboard, and I erased it from like all of the things that I'm doing. Those little lines on the sides are things that I was like, I think this is what I can see, but you never know until you go live. So I'm going to give us a bit closer if I can do. Okay, so this is going to the other side. Welcome to my whiteboard in my house. I love having a whiteboard. If you don't have a whiteboard in your house or in your office, you are missing out on one of God's great gifts. So, I didn't figure out how to place my notes. What is a Springboard resource? So essentially what we do is you take any situation and you sort of work it through these three questions, and then sort of create something out of that. So this is a resource to facilitate parents to already use the skills they have and get them doing it in normal everyday life or within a church scenario that you need them to. So start typing in any questions and answers that you need, and start typing in any situations that you'd like us to workshop with you, because when I'm done working through these examples, we'll pick one of yours. And if not, I'll make one up. So for me, the first question is, what is the end goal? Because we want them to be using a specific skill. We want them to be experiencing something, and we want them to have an end goal. For one example that I use in the book, It Takes a Church to Raise a Parent. This is from the book It Takes a Church to Raise a Parent, by the way. It looks like this. One of the examples I used was one church I was working at. We had a lot of parent-child combinations, and I was realizing that one of the things I really wanted them to be able to do was to have God conversations, to be able to talk about God naturally, easily, in a way that just sort of came out of them. And I just wanted them to have natural conversations in their home. And so the end goal for me became wanting to have good God conversations. I don't like that I'm using purple. I'm just letting you know I'm probably going to change colors at some point. I wanted them to have good God conversations. And the barrier I found was that at this particular church, the parents and children struggled to know what questions to ask each other. It wasn't that they didn't know how to listen. It was that they didn't know what questions to ask. And so they were sort of waiting for each other to volunteer information, because they were really willing to listen. They just didn't waiting and you weren't talking about God. So I would get a lot of parents saying, my kid just doesn't talk about God. And I try to talk about God, but it just isn't happening. And so I realized that there was a major barrier. And that's the question when you're thinking about, do I need a Springboard resource? The question is, what is the barrier? What is the really heavy car that needs us to help push so that they can just get going and go on? And for me, it was training my parents in that scenario how to ask questions. What are good questions and how to ask them, how to find those questions. So for me, then the barrier was what questions to ask. They already had the skills of listening, and they already knew how to ask questions. They just couldn't ask the right ones. They weren't able to find it. And so when I began to look at what resource do they need, how can I help them solve this problem, to get them over the barrier, to have good conversations, I created a game. I created a simple game, a questions game. That was just 2 sets of cards. One set of cards for the parent, one set of cards for the kids. That was, and then interspersed with some silly cards like do 10 push-ups with your teammate on your back, or, something like that, so that you never knew which card you were going to pick up. And so it was the simplest game. You'd pick up a card, and it was something like, some of them were God questions, some of them were just deep family questions, like, name 2 things about me that you admire and want to be like me. And that was for a kid to ask a parent. And so then a kid would ask a parent, what are 2 things about me that you really admire and want to be more like me about? And then a parent could talk about that, what they admire in their child's life, and the other way around. And so they began to learn how to ask questions, from what was the first time you were disappointed in God, to what's one thing you would wish that you could ask God when he was right here, to what's your favorite worship song and why, to if we had to move to a different country, what would it be, and what could possibly tempt you to move there? Just questions, so that they began to get used to asking good questions that drew each other's hearts out, and they began to learn to ask questions about God, but it didn't tell them what to answer, and it didn't tell them where to go with it, and it didn't tell them anything else besides, here's some questions you might want to ask. And after that, we began to see a lot of really much better conversations about God. Parents saying they feel more comfortable to ask questions, because they weren't just saying, so, you praying a lot? They began to be able to ask, hey, how are you feeling connected with God? Or, I know sometimes that can knock, when you go through something like that, that can really knock how you feel about that. I remember how this happened in my life. How are you feeling about it? And it gave them phrasing. It gave them opportunities to do that. Does that make sense? Right. What else? Another thing that we did was having a look. Oh, baptisms. So one of the things is I had hundreds of people doing baptisms, and I worked at a particular Anglican church, and so we had a lot of infant baptisms. And so we had, hundreds of people coming as participants to view. So it's their first time in church, a lot of them. Some people not, but they would come travel from a long way away. And for others, it was just quite a ritualized, we had lots of things with the candle and, other things. And it was a service that was hard to negotiate. And so for that, I was really looking at what's the end goal, because I found that parents were struggling with their kids. Their kids were running around. The kids weren't engaged. They felt uncomfortable. And I was thinking, I want parents, not us as a church to negotiate this for parents, but I want parents to be able to use the skills they have of just explaining stuff to your kid. I want them to be able to use that in a church context, no matter where they are on their faith journey. So I wanted parents to feel confident to explain church to their kids, was my thing. So parents, explain church to kids. And I felt the barrier was, I had a couple of barriers, I think, in that scenario. One, there was a barrier of parents not knowing they had permission to do that. So I felt like they needed permission to get them over that. But also, some of them didn't know. They had a lack of knowledge. It wasn't they had a lack of knowledge of how to talk to their kids. They just didn't know what to say. And so when I was looking at how do I create a resource that doesn't do all of the work for parents and just create a book for kids to read about this scenario so that the parents just leave them to it, but how do I set up parents to succeed in this environment wherever they are on the journey? And so I ended up creating a sort of baptism pack, a sort of companion book to say, companion book. And so as families would come in, the companion book sort of said, this is the running order of it. And it was for parents. And so it wasn't, this is a booklet for kids to look at. So this is a parent's guide to this. And so it was a sort of running order of what's happening so that when the kid goes, oh my gosh, is it done yet? You can say, no, after the song, we're going to do this. It also said in it, feel free to coach your kid through that. We're always happy to hear the little pitter patter of whispering as you whisper and help your kid through it. And then I also created a sort of guide in terms of like, it can be confusing. And so I would made these little icons, like a sort of icon or a icon. And in the booklet, it said, this is when this happens. This is the, when the head guys, his name was Will. So when I say, Will's now going to sign the cross on his head, this is what this means. And it was more of a, this is what this means thing. Feel free to point out this to your child. And so I created something where whenever the thing happened, from confession to explaining to the water, I would just flick this icon up from the front of church, and then hundreds of parents, or tens of parents, depending on, would then look at their thing and go, oh, there's an icon. And then they would read it, and then they would whisper to their kid, this is when they're going to do this thing. This is what it means. We're going to look out for this. And then they could coach it, and it sort of gave them what to say and gave them permission to say it. So whenever a new icon came up, whenever we moved into a different section of the service, the parent could go, oh, there's a thing, and look down and then be able to say, this is when our hearts connect to God. How do you want to do that? And I just set them up to say, you might want to say something to your kid, and this is what is happening. Feel free to explain it in any way you want. And we found people really enjoyed that, engaged with that, because they began to feel really confident in being able to do that. What we began to see is not only did the guest families who had never been to church feel more comfortable themselves, but because they were feeling more comfortable and they were feeling able to explain it to their kids, we saw more of them come back to visit, and we saw church families who had already been there coaching their kids through the service more in other services when they didn't have a booklet. It sort of allowed them to springboard into going, oh, I can explain this to my kid. Does that make sense? So those are ways of creating springboard resources and when you need to. And there's no right way to do it. But let's look at your scenarios. What scenarios are you experiencing that we can work this through with? Oh, Becky Drake's there. Sorry, I've been working on this thing. Okay, so let's see. Oh, no, I'm listening to myself. No? Well, then I'll come up with a different one. Right, so I think a different scenario that we could possibly look at is starting to, let's see, what else can we look at? Okay, what do we do for Halloween? We've got Halloween coming up. We are there. Many people are going to do light parties. And so how do we then enable parents to discuss Halloween with their kids? Because often the springboard for parents to discuss Halloween with their kids is whether or not they go trick-or-treating. So they have this sort of negative springboard of an inevitable conversation that they then feel sort of backed in the corner with. But how can we create a springboard resource for parents to proactively talk about Halloween with their kids and what their position is. Parents will have a variety of different opinions about Halloween. And so it's not about saying this is the right way, or this is the conversation to have, or this is the booklet to work through. How can we create a springboard resource to enable their parents to have a good conversation with their kids? So what's the end goal? I think let's make the end goal parents sharing. Yes, let's do a conversation that enables the whole family to talk about, to talk about Halloween. Because I think we find kids asking and parents giving a decision, but how do we facilitate parents having that good conversation where they as a team can sort of decide and flesh out what do they as a family think? What's the barrier to that? One, I think there could be lots of different means. One, I think sometimes parents don't know what they think. They just have a sort of general sense of like, I like it, I don't like it. They have a gut feeling, but they don't know how to articulate it. Don't know how to talk about it. Well, how to talk about what they're feeling about it. And I would almost say that one of the barriers, if I'm thinking on my feet, is I think sometimes it is about the actual permission. It centers around an action. So it centers around, are we going trick-or-treating? Are we going to participate in the school fair? Are we going to do something? And so the conversation has consequences immediately. I haven't thought this through. This is totally me, like this is what comes out of my brain, genuinely. So I think there is something about, I'll do this so that we could. I think there genuinely is something about it being tied to an action. And what else? And I don't know what questions to ask. Maybe it's not questions. Maybe it's more... Well, let's start with that they don't know how to talk about it from their sort of what they think and feel. And that is tied to the season itself. And so if I'm totally thinking on my feet, what would I do to help parents have a really good conversation about the issues around Halloween and how they feel about it in a way that doesn't walk them through my agenda for them? I think I would probably, this is totally just coming out of my brain, I think I would probably set up a conversation about it in like July. I would probably resource in July, because that takes out, or July or November, I think, because then it's not about what is going to happen, about whether or not you get permission, so that then the conversation is about, there's this tantalizing party that I want to go to, now we have to talk about Halloween. But it would be much more about our family's approach to the world, our family's approach to being in the world and of the world, and why we choose those things. So it could be part of a Halloween debrief, or it could be part of a, hey, in like a million years, something's coming up and we don't even know what is going on, but I just thought we should probably start talking about it. So I would probably facilitate a conversation that is not around the crucial time, because that means you can prepare your family for, next year. So let's say we go for the November one. So I'm going to go for the November one. And so how would I facilitate families talking about it? I might then create some sort of, it could be a breakfast at church, where we just put people in tables and like debrief Halloween together. I could create a sort of family pack of design your own Halloween tradition. If there was no trick-or-treating and no traditions out there, what would you do as your family to celebrate the light of Christ? So I could either do a family pack that talks about Halloween. So I know there's this one, my friends run a Center for Worship and Justice, and they do this great thing on November 1st, which is All Hallows Eve, and they have people write in testimonies about people who have impacted their lives and people who have shown the light of Christ through them, and really celebrating the saints. And I love that. So we've integrated part of that into what we do during this season of talking about, the people who we've really seen God in and how it's impacted our lives. And so you could facilitate that conversation. You could create a family pack that says, here's all of the different ways that we can celebrate God as the light and the impact that people have on us and how he shines in the darkness. What would that look like for your family? And begin to facilitate that conversation and allowing them to design their own light party for next year, or to design their own way that they want to do tradition. And within that, there can be questions of how do you feel about that? Parents being able to talk about their experience of Halloween as a child and how it impacted them and what they're feeling. And we could create this sort of family pack of conversation that ends nowhere. There's nothing that says, now you must design a light party for next year, but it would be more facilitating, what does light look like? What does light look like for us? Look like for us? Look like for us? What are the different ways that other people do it? Why and how I feel, and letting kids express how they feel. And what should we do? That's a Springboard resource, because it doesn't say explore these 5 topics with your kids and explain to them that this is what you've decided. It's a Springboard resource because it's saying, let's open the pot on all of these different issues, and I can help you jump in and see where it goes from there. Right, a suggestion would be engaging boys in main church worship. All right, let's go for that. How do we engage? It says boys, but I'm going to go for kids who are more active, because there are many active girls and many active boys and many contemplative boys and many contemplative girls. So I'm going to go for how do we help the more active children who struggle to stay seated in that sort of scenario engage in main worship? Excellent question. One, it's going to be in the context of the family. And if they don't have family coming, then I would suggest there's a sort of scenario of family being set up for them. So when you have drop-off kids, pairing them with other families who can facilitate that. So let's look at that. Right. So this end goal would be, let's say, parents feeling competent to help their active kids engage in church. Because I find what happens sometimes is we as a church take on the burden of trying to make it engaging for our active children, and I would say active adults. There's a lot of active adults who struggle to be in church, and we then sort of take that on and say, right, how can we as a church do all of the work to make those kids engage? And I think we have a responsibility as a church to be engaging for people of all different learning styles and expressions. So I think we as a church do have that. But I think what happens sometimes is we then take the burden, and that circumvents the parent, and the child then begins to become consumeristic in terms of, this church isn't engaging enough, it's boring. And so we have this sort of struggle of the church trying to be more engaging and the child going, this isn't engaging enough. And so the church tries harder or bails, and then the kid's like, well, if the church isn't even going to try, then I'm not going to. And it takes out the power of a parent. I really firmly believe that any child can engage with any style of church, because we're a beautiful and vast body of Christ, and God is in so many different expressions, and it's about everybody finding how they can engage with God in the scenario that they're in. And as adults, we can move churches and find a church that enables our expression. As kids, we can't, but we can, as parents, facilitate them doing that. So how do we create a springboard into that? Remember, a springboard resource is about skills that parents already have. And I think parents often feel like they don't have skills in this area of helping their active kids engage with church. And that is not true. And what we need to do, I think, is one of the things is to help parents realize they already have skills in this. So one of the barriers is that parents feel like they have no skills in this area. Now, sometimes that needs to be addressed through formal teaching. So on the Parenting for Faith course we have, which is on the Parenting for Faith website, we have a whole session on helping kids engage with church. So sometimes if parents genuinely have no skills in helping their kid connect with a group corporate environment, sometimes parents don't. Sometimes parents don't have those skills of how do you help your kid engage with something, then they may need to go on that course. We may need to not start with a Springboard resource, but we may need to bring in a sort of, we need to bring in an external thing first. So we need to bring in an external teaching to help. And so whether it's the one session on helping your kids engage with church, whether it's taking them aside on a Sunday morning and doing 20 minutes every Sunday for the next 6 weeks. I've been playing with this. I'm calling it worship pods. But how do we take families and give them skills as we go along and then release them into that? So sometimes you do need to think, actually, it's not a Springboard resource. It's an external teaching. But sometimes you look at parents and you think, I know you know how to help your kid. I've seen you take your kid to the hospital or to school, and I know your kid can sit still for 40 minutes, and I know you know how to get them to do that. You're just not applying it here, I think, because the spiritual aspect scares you. And so how do I get you to use the skills that you already have to help them engage? Because it's not about helping them be still, it's about helping them engage. When your kid's a toddler, you show up with all of the kit, you show up with the, right, I have a 2-year-old, therefore I have my toys, I have the snacks, I have everything I could possibly, this is a bag, I have everything I could possibly need to help my kid engage, exist in this space. And sometimes parents forget that they still know what their kid needs, whether it means that their kid needs to get up and walk around, whether it means that their kids need a break. Sometimes they just need to be encouraged to use those skills and find those skills for how to help your kid engage. So what is the barrier? Is them feeling like they have no skills or how to apply it. And sometimes they just don't know the options. They've never had to apply those skills to a church setting, so nobody's ever told them the different ways that you can help your kid. They know that their kid usually needs a break every 20 minutes. To someone say, feel free to, have your kid have a break or walk around at the back or do whatever you need to help your kid genuinely engage and enjoy church is important. So how do we create that? How do we create a Springboard resource for parents to use the skills they already have or have recently learned in a Sunday morning? How do we do that? We can create permission from the front. Sometimes a Springboard resource doesn't even have to be written. It can just be a way you frame stuff from the front of church. So you could do a frame resource for anyone who's leading a service to be able to say, welcome to Sunday morning at this church. We want you to be you and to engage with God in the way that fits not only for you, but for this whole body. And so if you're struggling to stay in your pew, feel free to, walk around the back, or we have this space at the front, or if you just need to get some wiggles out, it's okay to move your body around. We want you and God to be able to connect. And whatever that looks like for you is perfectly okay. So however you want to frame it from the front, it gives that space, and it also makes people feel safe in the boundaries. If you just say, feel free to completely be you, whatever, it feels like I will cross a line at some point and I don't know what the line is. Or if you can say from the front, feel free, there's some space on the side, or feel free to, go to the back. That gives you, as a church, whatever boundaries you feel you need to make sure that everyone else is being respected while allowing space for the active kids to do that. You could create packs to help parents do things with the kids. I know some churches who have all age stuff that isn't necessarily designed for all age, like not all age services, but if the kids groups aren't on all the time, they have sermon packs so that, you know, kids can work through the sermon with their parents through that. You can create resources within the worship. So once for active kids, I did a pack that was something for parents to work through with their kids, different ways to connect with worship, because I felt like they had the skills to coach their kids in it. They just didn't know how to apply the skills that they had. And so I created a little tick list of these are 4 things to try during worship. And it was sort of like lay on the ground, read the words, and put your hands up anytime you actually agree with the words. So the kids could be like, our God, for some reason I'm thinking our God is an awesome God, but that's not. It was 10,000 reasons. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, kids had down. Sing like never before, oh my soul, blah, blah, blah. And they would just read the words and sing, and then you watch their little hands go up anytime that's something that their heart really meant, which meant that a parent could then do it with them, and then they could talk about, oh, I really liked that line too. And it facilitated them doing things that would fit into the church environment, but gave them permission to do it side by side, and said that these are 4 things to try. And then at the end, I just said at the bottom of that sheet, why not discuss how you connected best with God in that scenario and try it next week? And I just basically had some experiments to try every week for the active kids to do with their families to help them find how they best connected with God. So then their parents could have those things in their bag. So when the kids say, I'm bored, or I'm just going around, you go, oh, you seem to have lots of energy. Do you want to do the raising your hand with the words thing? Or do you want to do the laying on the floor and saying, if you could feel the vibrations in your body? And so I began to build their grab bag of stuff to pull, because they already knew how their kids worked. They then learned to know how to pull that. Does that make sense? Right. I think, oh, look at the time. I think unless there's anything else, unless there's any questions, I'm going to let you go from lunch. I hope that's been helpful. I hope that has sort of given you some ideas of how to use those Springboard resources and try something new. Yeah, be blessed. Let me pray for you if I can. Joe, would you like me to be able to share the tick list? Yeah, I can find it. It's somewhere on my computer, like everything else. I'll have a look, and we'll try to do that. Then let me pray for you. God, I thank you that you've put us in this great position of empowering parents. And so I pray that you would just grow their skills. I pray that you would grow us in helping parents do this and create opportunities for us to springboard them into all you've called them to do. In Jesus' name. Amen. Bless you guys. We'll see you later. I realized that I wasn't looking at you when I did that. That made me sad. Hold on. I love you guys, and I'll see you later. I was looking down at my phone trying to look at all your comments. I just want to say thanks for joining me for lunch. Mwah!